Woburn. I'm your host, Samantha Stone, and I'm thrilled because Senator Friedman has joined us again to catch up on all the things that have been happening across the city. We'll also catch up with the mayor, as we usually do. We'll talk to School Committee Chair Andrew Lipsett about some really important decisions the school committee has to make and how you can get involved in sharing your point of view. And we'll also touch base about an upcoming blood drive that you'll want to support. So welcome, everyone. Welcome, Senator.
Hi, Samantha. It's wonderful to see you.
I'm really glad to be with you today. There has been so much happening.
I know.
And before we dive into too much of the specifics about some of the great bills and things that have been happening, I want to talk a little bit just in general.
Sure.
Massachusetts overall is in a different place than we were budget-wise not all that long ago. We had a surplus at one point, and we don't any longer, and that means we have made some cuts to some earmarks and things across the state. In general, how are you feeling about that, and what might we expect? Are we expecting to see significantly more of that?
The answer is maybe. I mean, I'm not. We've had such a budget glut in a way, you know, and most of that has been because of all the federal funding that's come down through the states through COVID-19 money, and it's been really great because we've been able to do things that are really, really important. You know, like make sure people get health care and funding programs for schools and doing capital improvements and things that we haven't been able to do because we haven't had that kind of money coming in. But that money's dried up, and we knew that it was going to, so that's not a surprise. We did our best to say to people, don't use this for one-time kinds of projects. Some people did, and some people didn't. Yeah. And even some people who didn't did it because it was really necessary. Like the schools have spent a lot of money on mental health workers and making sure that kids are acclimated coming back to school, and that's all really important. Now that money has dried up in a way that people are struggling, entities are struggling with how do we continue these really important programs. So I don't know what's coming down the pike. I mean, we're not in terrible shape because we have a very, very good rainy day fund, and we've had money in accounts that we've held on to that we can use for, you know, to fill some gaps. But we don't know what's coming. We don't. And it's very unclear that this coming up election is very important to see, you know, what the federal government's going to do to support states.
You know, I feel a little bit like my days when I was in college and I was given a budget, but my dad and, you know, paid for school and all my expenses, and I knew I was graduating, but then the reality of, that allowance is gone. I need to go to work now.
Yep.
And I think a lot of us are facing similar things, which is just a reality of we have been fortunate to have a lot of that funding. It comes at a cost, of course, and we now need to just, be a little bit more cautious, perhaps.
Yep. Yeah.
One of the bills I want to just talk a little bit about, because it purports, I think, to help a little bit with some of the funding things, is there was an enhancement to the federal funding competitiveness program.
Yes.
And I know that won't close necessarily the gap of the federal funding that we have been given and we've been using intelligently. Right. Certainly in Woburn, we've certainly used it for schools and leveraged it in the way it was intended. Tell us a little bit about what that bill is and what that does mean for us.
So I think that what you're referring to is that there's a bill that would allow the state to use rainy day funds for matching federal grants. So it's actually a really good idea. So it says, if there's a grant to rebuild the New Boston, right, and bridge, and we can get money from the feds, this will give us a pot of money that we can pay into, because many federal grants are matching grants. So they say, you give us $1 million, we'll give you $1 million. So it's a really smart way to use money that we were going to use anyway, that we needed to use. But this takes almost half the burden sometimes, or more, or sometimes less, from us having to spend the whole thing. So that's what that bill does, and it's a good bill.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for us, and I know that, Woburn has traditionally relied on grants and applied for them, but this gives us another good reason to make sure we're building the infrastructure to support
and
that.
it's going to be on things that we had planned to pay for anyway, so there may be in a capital budget or there, so it's not as if we're just raiding the rainy day fund.
So from a not detailed logistics perspective, but as a community like Woburn, and does it change how we apply for grants? Or is it, we do the work we normally do?
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's state grants.
Okay,
that when the state can, apply for a grant.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's helpful. That's excellent. One of the things that we see a lot in Woburn, and we see across the state, is that affordable housing is increasingly difficult to get. In Woburn, we have very high occupancy rate. I think it's at 4%. Healthy-wise, we want to be closer to 7-8%. Even the affordable units are not affordable to many full-time working families.
That's right.
And I know that this is a big challenge that a lot of people are trying to address. One of the, and we don't have, in Woburn, we don't have an emergency shelter. And so folks who are in that situation often need to leave the community for the night and come back. And there's all kinds of logistics that go.
Yep.
And I wouldn't expect you to have the solution to that problem while we're talking today, but I am curious how that fits into the overall agenda for us as a state and the work that we're doing to help improve the situation over time.
I spend most of my time in healthcare because I'm the chair of healthcare financing in the Senate. There is nothing more important than housing. It is the barrier to pretty much anything that we're trying to do to support people to be able to support themselves. There are numbers of efforts going on, and there's a lot of focus, which can't come soon enough. There's the MBTA Communities Act, which I know people feel differently about, but if we don't just start fundamentally building housing, we will never have enough. The governor has done a housing bond bill, which has money in it to ensure that all of the public housing units are online. Many of them are not. So that puts a burden on people who have, lost their homes in Woburn for various reasons. It got sold, or they were evicted because somebody's son and daughter wanted to come in, or there was a fire or whatever, and they become homeless. The public housing, we need to ensure that it's quality and that it's all online. So that will help. And I think it's close to 2,000. I mean, there's quite a number of units that are offline. So if we can get a bond bill, fix those up, make them available to people, that will take some pressure off. There is the real estate transfer tax for real estate that's over $1 million, and I'm sure there's some discussion about, well, everything's over, it feels like it's over $1 million, so maybe it should be 2 or whatever, but that just for very high price transactions, that there would be a tax, a very small tax that would go back to the city and town to help build or find affordable housing. So those are just some of the things that are going on, but there's a real concerted effort in how do we address housing. It won't come soon enough, but we have to start now.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned very quickly is, this is a new position around community outreach in the city, just started in January, and I am not naive. I knew there were homeless families living in Woburn. I didn't realize how many working families were either in that situation or so close to the verge of that situation that it was sort of a constant living in survival mode. And it was eye-opening to me.
Yeah. I think at one point, this was a number of years ago, but at one point, all the families in shelter in New York, of all the families, 75% of those families had full-time jobs.
Yeah. That's just shocking,
That's
right?
shocking, yeah.
Yeah.
That's who's in shelter.
Yeah. It was really surprising to me to learn that, and so I'm grateful for any of the things that we can do to help build homes that working families can afford to be in.
Absolutely, I agree.
Let's talk about some of the great legislation that has progressed forward. One of the things that is, I know, near and dear, because it's sort of healthcare related, is around the wheelchair warranty legislation. Let's talk a little bit about that.
So the Senate passed a bill that would ensure that there would be that the wheelchair industry would be responsible for fixing wheelchairs in timely manners. And it turns out, I think there's 2 companies across the country that really are responsible for all this. So the Senate passed that bill, and then it went to the House. And the House, for some reason, sent it to healthcare financing, and we're ready to report it out. We're ready to say, nope, we did this, we're ready. I think it's so important, and it's fundamental fairness. I mean, on so many levels.
One of the things that I know a couple families who have really struggled with this, and it's, sort of their situation is the same as an elevator breaks, like the part's on back order.
Yeah.
And it's on back order for months, but this is a person's ability to physically live in the world.
Absolutely.
Right? They don't have an option, an alternative to their wheelchair.
Right.
In many cases.
Right.
Sometimes there's an adaptation I can make for a short term, but
no, it's
important.
critical. It's I mean, it's like having a car. It's like, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I want to also talk a little bit about the blue envelope bill, because this is really designed to help people who are on the autism spectrum if they get pulled over by the police. Tell us a little bit about that effort.
So the blue envelope is an opt-in piece of legislation, meaning you don't have to do it, but you can opt in. And for folks on the autism spectrum, they can get a blue envelope. So if they're presented with some encounter with the police or with public safety or firefighters, EMTs, or anyone, that they can show this envelope, which will indicate I am autistic or I have autism spectrum, and so now you know that I may respond to you in a way that might not originally make sense to you, but now does, now that you know. So it's really to protect people on the autism spectrum and giving others an ability to understand what's going on in that situation. I think, again, it's a great bill, and it's not a heavy lift.
It is a wonderful way to understand people in what is typically a stressful, unusual situation.
Yes, right.
So it is particularly important for folks who under stress might have a hard time communicating, where they might under normal day-to-day situations communicate very effectively.
Right. Or they don't communicate the way you're expecting somebody to communicate, and now you'll know, okay, there's a reason for this.
Where are we in being able to implement that?
I think that one's been passed. I think
that was my impression.
Yeah,
as well.
I think it's been passed, and so I think I think the governor signed it, and so that means it will be. There's probably some regulations that need to be set.
It'll be wonderful. And I know our local police department is always looking for ways to improve communication with the community. So I have not talked to Chief Rufo specifically about this, but I would be surprised if he wasn't really supportive of it.
I think it's a great for public safety as well, because then they know what.
Yes, exactly. It's good all the way around for everyone. And then one other one that I wanted to call out was around fentanyl test strips, because this is one of those funny things that seems so common sense, and yet there's been this little obstacle that has blocked people from being able to use this really simple, affordable tool to help folks in need.
Right. So we have lots of laws against controlled substances or being in possession of controlled substances. Fentanyl strips work in a way that detects if there's fentanyl in some medication or medicine or something, or powder or something. The way they work, though, is that they have a bit of that controlled substance in them. So by the letter of the law, they're illegal. And if you're caught with one, you could be arrested. Well, the people of the using them are healthcare workers who are trying to prevent overdoses, and there's also people who use drugs who are also now using them because they want to know what's in the drug that they're using. So they're a completely safe and, as you said, useful tool to keep people safe. And this law fixes that loophole so that, if you're trying to help somebody not be poisoned, or overdosed, then you would be able to use a fentanyl strip. And they're cheap and they're easy to use. They're very easy to use.
And if we look at our own data within Woburn about overdoses that I see the report every week, they're almost all fentanyl overdoses. And in many cases, I'm sure not all, the people were not intending to take fentanyl.
Exactly.
It was mixed in with something that they had acquired, and they didn't know that it was.
And we're seeing it in everything, And remember, substance use disorder is an illness, and people are trying to, they're addicted, and they need those drugs, so they want to know that it's safe.
Thank you. There's a lot going on, and I appreciate you helping catch us up on some of those important things. You've also, very local to Woburn, Social Capital Inc. is an organization here that is near and dear to our hearts. They do an incredible amount of work here. And one of the things that they have going on right now, which doesn't just serve Woburn, but is one of the communities, is a youth grant program. You have supported that. Tell us a little bit about why you feel it's important and helpful to the communities overall.
So I don't know when I learned about SCI, but I've known about it for a little while. I went to something that they did. I think the very first thing might have been the first Juneteenth, or maybe it was before that. Yeah. I was so impressed with what they did and how they did it. And then they invited me to something where they have a competition among youth who are doing a business or have a proposition to do something. And I was so impressed and blown away by the quality of the work that they're doing. I love their focus on equity and on community, of bringing everybody in the community together. And so I think those kinds of opportunity for young people are just really critical. First of all, they love to do them. Yeah. They're very hands-on. They're meaningful. They learn a lot about the world and how you go about putting together something that you want to get done. And I just think it's a great thing. So I'm very proud to be able to support those kinds of things.
I'm fortunate to sit on the board of SCI, so I'm a little biased. But also the reason I do that is because I do think they do some incredible work. Yeah. And I had the chance to be a judge last year at the contest, and I was so impressed. Here's these very young, some are high school students, some are as young as middle school, who worked with coaches to help mentor them and teach them these presentations. And they had not only these big ideas, but very doable ideas. And they had worked so hard to be able to articulate that and build support for it. And it's just a really impressive group of young people who are out there to change their community for the better.
Yeah, yep. It was really great. They were so cool.
It's really fun to watch. Before I let you go, I wanted to just sort of pause for a moment and give you a chance to talk about what your priorities are for the remainder of the year.
Well, they change from day to day, Samantha, because so many things happen. We did the PACT Act, which is the Pharmaceutical Access Bill. We did it in the Senate again, and this is a bill that really very much aims at bringing the cost of pharmaceuticals down for people in the Commonwealth.
Yes. I had a recent experience, and I'm very fortunate I was enrolled in a copay program for the manufacturer of a drug that I need. Right. But it's a drug that helps me breathe, and without it I can't. And I had a little panic moment where the copay was like, whoa, it went really, really high. Now again, I'm fortunate. I have insurance. They connected me. I ended up not having to pay that. But boy, if I wasn't in that position, I don't know what I would have done.
Right. Or you didn't have the means or the mechanisms to know what to do when you got. I mean, so many people just have no idea. How do I even go about this? Why am I getting this? It's just such an opaque and foreign world, and that's not how we should be doing things. So this bill puts some mechanisms in place to help control some of those costs, and it also directly brings down the cost of insulin, chronic health condition drugs, and asthma. so that we put a cap on how much a copay can be per month. Because those drugs they're common illnesses, they're chronic illnesses, they are taken well care of if you do your if you take your medication, and the people who don't get those drugs tend to be people who are low income or minority. And so this would say, no, in the insurance companies, you can't have a higher copay than $25 a month for these drugs. So it does that. It brings the pharmaceutical companies into the cost trends hearing and the benchmarks for Health Policy Commission, which helps us determine how much healthcare is increasing from year to year. Very important thing to know, especially because pharma is the thing that's growing so fast. And then it addresses pharmacy benefit managers, who are the middlemen between an insurance company and pharmaceutical companies. They set the prices with the insurers on what you're going to pay, and it's a very squirrely, dark, mucky hole in there, and it's 3 companies own over 80% of the business.
Wow.
And there's a lot of shenanigans that have been going on. So we've been trying to, so this bill affects that. We're also looking at a bill that is, sounds very wonky, but it's how the Health Policy Commission, which is what oversees our healthcare costs, we need to update them to the 21st century. Very important. Everyone's like going, but they have so much say over who comes in, long-term care, nursing homes, assisted living, things, hospitals, insurers, things that we all depend on. So we're going to update them, and that's a big bill. And we're really looking at how the effect of private equity and for-profit on healthcare is. It's, Stewart has certainly exacerbated that, but it's been going on for a long time. Private equity does not belong in healthcare. Private equity are companies that come in and take over places to make very short-term gains. Healthcare is not a short-term gain game and should never be. It should be about the patient, about what they need, and about how we can efficiently and effectively deliver care. So those are a couple of the big ones. We have a big migrant situation that we've been facing. Woburn has been incredible in its welcome, in helping people to acclimate and get settled here. We are desperate for these migrants. They are the people who are going to, work in our hospitals and take care of our families and do such critical work. We have a healthcare shortage just in healthcare we're looking at now 30,000 positions that aren't being filled.
Wow.
And that's just doesn't even begin to cover the other industries. So I am delighted to have these folks come, but we need to get them housed and we need to get them working, work permits so that they can afford housing and get into jobs that our employers need. So that's going to be something that we're going to need to look at.
That a lot of important work and so much more than what we had time to talk about today. Thank you so much for coming in, though.
Well, thank
we
you
really
for having
appreciate
me.
it.
And thanks for everything you're doing. And I want to put a shout out to the mayor, who has established a constituent services person or director. It's been great. We've worked with you. Our office has worked. And it's just a wonderful thing that you're doing and that we get to work with. So thank you, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Next up, it's my pleasure to welcome Andrew Lipsett, who's the chair of the school committee, to talk about some really important things that are happening. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you're here. We as a city have talked about, at least as long as I've lived here, I think, redistricting and where we put folks. And we're in a position right now where we need to do something. Maybe it's not redistricting, but we need to take an action. I thought it'd be helpful to just take a moment for you to talk about what's going on that has put us in a position where we can't just push this down the way.
Sure, and I appreciate that framing, right? Because this is something that, it's not as though we were chugging along, everything hunky-dory, and now suddenly. This has been sort of a long emerging situation and issue, as you alluded to. And for the past several years, we've been able to sort of make minor changes in terms of a program shifting from here to there, preschool classroom shifting from here to there. Understanding that talking about something like redistricting is it's a big ask, right? That's a big disruption for our families, for our staff, for our schools. And so whenever we can make those minor adjustments that allow us to continue, we do so. It's worth noting that we don't have an overcrowded school system, right? What we have is a school system that's somewhat out of balance, right? We have been adding a number of students, and I know we've talked about that at school committee recently, but right now we have about as many students in our district as we did in 2018 when we had the same number of schools, right? So what we have now is simply that the city hasn't done a real look at our school lines since the late 1980s at this point. And obviously, if you've driven anywhere in Woburn lately, it's a different place than it was, right? So now as we look towards the future, as we look at the feasibility study and we look at the future of our buildings, and we reach a point where that imbalance is so great that we do have some pretty significant inequities going on in the district as we speak. Now seems like a good time to take a look at some larger options, and certainly if we don't end up going in that direction, we do still need to make some relatively significant moves to make sure that we can continue with what we're doing.
Yeah, that's great. And so for those who might not be as familiar with it, correct me if I'm wrong, what we're talking about in terms of inequity is often class size is one of the factors, but what are some of the other factors? Class
size is certainly a piece of it. We have some schools where we have relatively low class sizes and some where we are hitting up against contractual caps. The other issues that we look at are things like, we have inequities in terms of middle schools, right? We have 3 elementary schools now, which are also our 3 that have capacity issues, where we have students who are splitting between the middle schools, and that's not ideal. My son is in 5th grade right now. He is at one of the affected schools, and he's sort of come to grips with this, but he's going to be saying goodbye to some of his close friends for a few years as he goes to one middle school and they go to another. We have, in terms of students who require additional supports in the classroom, we have programs that we've been able to sort of shift around. But what we have when we have unbalanced class sizes and unbalanced capacity at different schools is we aren't able to use that staff as effectively as we can. We aren't able to distribute services as effectively as we can. And so that's not just a disservice to some of our students at times, but it can be something of an inefficiency in terms of how we're running our district, right? So we're looking at all of those as we sort of look down the line. What's best for our families? What's best for our students? How do we make our school district more efficient and better at delivering the services that we need to?
Now, there are a number of options that are on the table. Yes. It's not just as simple as, hey, we're going to do X. No. That would be an easier decision. What are some of the things that we're considering as options?
So the Resources Subcommittee met a couple of weeks ago and was presented with, in the end, about 7 different options, many of which sort of overlapped. So what the committee did at this point a couple weeks ago is to look through those options, eliminate ones that simply weren't feasible. Modular classrooms, for example, we have a lot of space issues. The cost was outrageous. There was no way for us to be able to do that. And what we ended up looking at were basically 3 different options. Option 1 is sort of a hold steady solution. Now that hides a whole lot of stuff in it, right? It is not a do nothing solution. What it is avoid major movements of school district lines for large numbers of students and sort of try to make do with the lines we have. Now that's going to put significant stresses on some school buildings. I know the Goodyear, the Malcolm White, and the Harold Wyman all have their own different stressors in terms of capacity, and none of those are going down right now. And so a hold steady solution would still require a fair amount of movement. It would require, for example, even in more specialist classes to lose their own separate spaces. So we wouldn't have, in some places, a library or a music or an art room, and we would have those specialists going classroom to classroom. That makes it harder for them to deliver the services that they're delivering and the instruction that they're delivering. But it does allow for a little bit more flexibility and space in those schools and allows us to alleviate those issues without major movement of lines. I'll take the third option second because it's a little bit easier to set up as an alternative. That is where we talk about a full redistrict of the city. And what we would do in that event is really be able to take a holistic look at our district, right? We have lines that have been sort of inherited from school after school. We have, if you actually look at a map of the school district lines, there are things that make very little sense. You know, we have students over by Horn Pond who have to take a bus past an elementary school to go to the Goodyear. You know, things that are sort of relics of previous moves. This would allow us to really take a look at the way to most efficiently district, to make sure that we are getting our students as close to their school buildings as we can. That would allow us to even out the services that we're delivering, even out class sizes across the district, and make it a more equitable district overall. Now, of course, the flip side of that is this is something that could be potentially very disruptive for families. This is something that could involve the movement of a fairly large number of students and a fairly large number of families. And that's something that we are very, very cognizant of. Right? And that brings us to the second option, which is it's not exactly a hybrid, but one of the areas that we are looking at is our preschool space. This is an integrated preschool. It's a preschool in which we offer, this is a constitutional or a Massachusetts mandate that we have to offer preschool classes to children between ages 3 and 5 with disabilities. And that's something that we are morally and legally and all of these things obligated to do, and we do it gladly. That program has grown relatively significantly over the last, I mean, I remember even since my time on the committee, this is my 5th year on the committee, we've been talking about increases in preschool space all the way. We've seen a pretty significant increase in that population. Not to the point where it's causing us real stress elsewhere, but we have 8 classrooms at the Reeves right now that have preschool classes in them. We have 4 classes at the Shamrock that have preschool classes in them. And so if we were able to find space for those, it might allow us to move some other stuff around. So that's a long-winded way of getting to the plan, which is that we would move the 8 preschool classrooms at the Reeves to the Linscott. The Linscott and Alta Vesta would not exactly combine into the same district, but split between themselves in the same geographical area. So sort of the larger North Woburn area, Linscott and the Alta Vesta districts. The Linscott would become a pre-K for the whole city, with those 8 classrooms, as well as a kindergarten and 1st grade for the students who currently attend the Linscott and Alta Vesta. The Alta Vesta would then become a 2 through 5 school for that same population. That would allow us then to alleviate some of the pressure at the 3 schools where we have capacity issues by moving students into the Reeves, where probably in a lot of cases they are geographically closer to. Right? Now, that option does solve some of our capacity issues. It addresses some of the long-term needs. It is also, in a lot of ways, the most complex with a lot of moving parts, at least at first. And it does offer its own inequities. You know, we are changing what we are doing in North Woburn to offer a different model than we would in our other elementary schools. And given that our North Woburn elementary schools are also our oldest, I certainly hear community feedback that presents an issue. So there are no easy answers here.
Right. So it is abundantly clear is that there is no right answer to doing this. And one of the things that I know the school committee cares deeply about is community input into the process. There's no doubt that some group of students are going to be impacted in some way, but to hear all those perspectives, what are the best ways for families to engage in this process and share their feedback?
So we have a number of things coming up. So first of all, anyone is welcome to send me an email specifically on this issue, or obviously any other. But sending to Andrew Lipsett, all one word, Lipsett, 2 T's at the end, at woburnps.com. I have received a large amount of communication already. I just looked at my phone and had 3 other emails that I hadn't seen yet. I mean, I'd also like to say, the overwhelming communication that I've received has been, I think, really great. It's been thoughtful, it's been kind, it's been personal, but it's also been thinking not just about the family that's affected, but other people's families as well. And I really appreciate that, and I would expect nothing less in Woburn. In terms of other opportunities for public input or public attention, we have a resources subcommittee that will be coming up on Wednesday night at the Joyce, in the school committee room. That's not one where we're able to have public comment, but it is going to be sort of an informational session. We'll be talking about some of the questions that we've gotten pretty regularly. We'll be able to go a little more in depth with some of the proposals, as I expect not just the members of the resource subcommittee, but other members of the school committee will be there as well. And we'll be able to go through some of these options. And then finally, as we just announced today, we'll be holding a special meeting on March 26th. That's Tuesday. That will be the meeting at which we hear from the community, and we will have public comment, and we invite people to come and speak their mind and ask questions and try to sort of get at what this is and appeal to the committee. We will then deliberate amongst ourselves, talk about the different options, hear from administration about how they can be put into effect, and then finally take a vote on which one we are directing administration to go forward with. And it's worth noting that that isn't the final step. Pretty much no matter what we do, we are going to then have to figure out how to put that into operation. Sure. So, for example, if we ended up deciding on option 3, the full redistrict, we don't have a secret map stashed away that we would put into effect. That's something where we would then be able to really take a look at the district, make the determinations that we need to make, present the committee with a few different options, and then go forward from there. So any of this is sort of the first decision in a couple of decisions that will lead us to where we are in September.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on. I know this is really important to a lot of people in the community, and the more we can communicate and share the decisions that have to be made and the thinking behind them, the better. So I'm super grateful for squeezing us in what I know is a busy time as we're preparing to collect all the information that's
Absolutely.
needed. So thank you for looking out for the community and to the whole school committee who has really hard decisions ahead. And to the community at large who is giving thoughtful feedback about how it will impact themselves and their neighbors and their community, and we're grateful for that as well.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving this a platform. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. As always, our Mayor Mike Concannon is with us today to catch up on all the things happening across the city. I know it's a busy week. Thank you for making time to chat with me as always.
Thank you for having me.
One of the things that's on this week's City Council agenda, and I've gotten very focused and my little notes to go look at it now more carefully than perhaps I ever have, and it's really helpful actually to see all the things that are happening. But one of the things that's on there is a new chief of staff position in the mayor's office. Tell us a little bit about what you envision that position doing and how it will help support Woburn as a community overall.
Sure. A little background first. During my 10 years on the council, last 2 as president, I did have an opportunity to interact with the mayor's office quite a bit. Great work being done there, great people in there. But I did notice that there was some needs and there was some things that had the potential to fall through the cracks. And it was just a note I made as I was preparing to run, something to look at. And then after the election, there was a period of time where I was attending training sessions for the newly elected mayors, about a dozen of us across the state, where we sat with seasoned mayors and learned some ins and outs and some ways of doing things to be as efficient as you can in your office and as successful and effective as well. And I was surprised during that time frame to learn that most of the cities and towns in the area, almost all of the cities in the state actually, have more robust staffing within the mayor's office. And hearing the explanations from those mayors of why they were needed, it gave me pause and again reinforced my thinking that perhaps more staffing was needed. I actually talked with former Mayor Galvin about this during the transition, and he was very candid and very helpful, and basically suggested that I take a look at staffing. He felt that there were some things that might have gone better with some additional staffing. So something I was seriously thinking about for a while. And then about 3 months in now, more than ever, I think it's necessary. And again, the main goal is to help me do my job better, which is leading city government. And practically speaking, and you know this, you're in many of the meetings I'm in, I'm in meetings most of the day. And the reality is that many of the things that come up in the meetings that need to be advanced suffer because there isn't adequate resources to push it over the goal line. So the main purpose of this position would be to do just that, to help facilitate speedier resolutions to issues, better coordination of the various entities involved, serving as a liaison to federal, state, local department heads, civic groups, outside groups, just to move the process further, quicker, and more efficiently. And again, it was as a result of the conversations with Scott, the current mayors and the newly elected mayors. I really believe this position is necessary to more effectively and efficiently advance the agenda.
Well, I certainly have seen the number of meetings that you're in all day, in the evening often, and also we're tackling some complex things.
Yep.
And having someone who can help tackle and bring all the right people together makes
and
sense.
in some instances, it's really just being more efficient with the time, with maybe some pre-meetings and then some post-meetings, again, pushing the ball over the goal line a little bit more. I really don't want to be in a position where we can't get things done, or we just get caught up in bureaucracy or schedule snafus. I really need to demonstrate progress and effectiveness, and I think this position will help me do that.
Great, thank you. One of the things that is on the agenda, there's a couple of new people joining the Disability Commission, which is always important to see, and kind of, or at least over the last few years. I can't speak to the role it had long ago, but over the last few years, it has mostly been a group that's kind of responded to complaints. It hasn't been a group that has been super proactive in the community, at least not visibly. What is your vision for the Disability Commission and the work that they'll be doing?
That's a good question. We're actually looking at almost all of the boards and commissions in the city. Obviously, there's some vacancies to be filled, but as we do that, we're looking at the mission and how they can best serve the city. And again, back to the position we were just talking about, part of the role would be to re-energize and refocus and get the most out of those commissions that we can. This one in particular, very important to the city. It's the advocacy group to make sure that the needs of the disabled persons in the community are met and that their voices are being heard. So it's a forum for those discussions to take place. And hopefully, it's also a group that can weigh in on current projects, proposed projects, issues around the city. I think we can get so much more out of that group. I know that the people who have been on it they're wonderful, they're caring, they're trying their best. I think a shot in the arm and maybe a refocusing of the mission would help a lot. But I do envision that group having a louder voice and being much more involved in city government than they are now.
That's great. We've gotten a lot of calls at City Hall the last week or so about water quality. There's a water filtration company that is sort of aggressively targeting, their salespeople targeting Woburn and offering to do water testing and things. But at the end of the day, is our water safe? Because that's the question that people call us and ask.
Yes, our water is safe. I think what prompted all that, I'm sure your viewers are familiar with the PFAS issue that we've been dealing with for several years now. We have a plan in place to build a new PFAS treatment plant. We're well underway with the bidding, and we'll be awarding the contract soon. So we have our arms around the problem. We're not the only community. Every community probably in the country is wrestling with it to some extent. But we have a plan and we're executing it. But part of that is the constant monitoring of the water and making sure that if we go above the allowable limits at all in any one quarter, we notify the public. So as a result of that happening this last quarter of 2023, we sent out the notification. And my sense is that this company or this entity that is raising awareness, I guess they would say, they're capitalizing on that PFAS concern, and it seems like maybe they're creating an impression that isn't accurate. So I would let folks know, yes, our water is safe. It's probably the best monitored water around. And in terms of the PFAS issue, I think we're at least as far, if not further along, than most communities towards solving that problem. And all this information, as you know, is available on the City of Woburn website. The Water Department, they're completely on top of this issue. They're well informed. They're available to answer any questions, any concerns that any member of the public has. They welcome the opportunity to explain the situation and put people's minds at ease. But yes, our water is safe, and it's only as a result of a recent decision to reduce the allowable threshold that put us in question at all, and we're responding to that, and we will be well within the limits when this is all done.
Great, thank you. And I encourage folks, as Mayor Concannon mentioned, to talk to the Water Department if you have questions. They're phenomenal at really answering any question that you have, explaining exactly how all of this works, and talking about your water and your particular neighborhood. So definitely encourage folks to do that. Thank you, as always, for joining us.
Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you. And our next guest, we saved the best for last with a call to action for you to move forward with, is talk about a blood drive. Welcome, Cindy from Tocci.
Tocci.
Why can I not say that word? I don't know why. Thank you for correcting me.
Think of like bocce balls, Tocci.
I love that analogy. That's wonderful. So you're hosting a blood drive, and I understand this is something you've done on a regular basis.
This is the 10th year.
How did it get started? 10 years, a big year.
Yeah, we have a woman in our office, Katie Colombo, who this is one of her most important things. She's really, it's for the Boston Children's Hospital, and that is one of her, very close to her heart. So every year she puts the whole thing together. And she can't be here right now because she is taking her son to karate lessons. So she said, could you? And I said, absolutely.
Well, I'm glad that you're here to talk about it on her behalf. And, you know, donating blood is really important. There is continually shortages of blood supply, and so that it is an act that you can do that is really meaningful to folks. Tell us a little bit about the day, where it's going to be hosted.
It'll be this Thursday, the 21st, between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. at our offices at 660 Main Street, right here in Woburn. You'll go right around to the back, and we have the blood mobile there. They do want you to have an appointment, but I suspect if you came by without one, they'd still squeeze you in. But go on to www.halfpints.childrenshospital.org, and the sponsor code is Tocci, Tocci. Or you can call them at 617-355-6677 and make an appointment that way. Let's see, if you wanted to, Tocci's offices are at the, we saved the old Guastavino tile factory, and it is a beautiful architectural building that is very, very important. If you know anything about architecture, the Guastavino was epic in architecture, and this is where he made all of his tiles and had his office. And the building itself is very, very interesting. So if you come by to donate blood, you can come on in and ask for me, Cindy, and I will show you around the whole office.
Well, that's a bonus.
Exactly. You get orange juice, you get a cookie, and you get a tour of an architectural gem that is right here in Woburn that nobody knows about. Very few people know about it. But if you come by and see it, it's
That's
great.
wonderful. And if you haven't donated blood, it isn't a scary process. The nurses who do this are amazing. But we know you could be a little nervous, so you can always bring a friend to hold a hand if you need a little bit of incentive to do that.
Yeah.
Anything else folks should know?
Let's see. No, I think that's about it. But they said they prefer you have appointments. But as I said, I suspect if you showed up without one, they would be fine, because they don't want to have people sitting around waiting or whatever. But so the information should be on the screen to either go onto the website or give them a call.
This is a great way to literally give life. It's such an important way to contribute. So if you are able, strongly recommend. And if you aren't able to donate, either because of the time and day, or you're unable to donate for a medical reason or any other reason, you can share the blood drive with folks that you know and encourage them to sign up. It's amazing, these productions, how much blood they're able to get in one place, one time. And you get a bonus tour of a wonderful architectural history, which is a bonus, along with that cookie.
Excellent. Now, I just found out that you do not need to have a COVID vaccine. You have to be in good health, but they say, COVID vaccines are no longer required to give blood. So if that's been holding you up, then please.
That's wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And as always, Woburn, please continue to take good care of each other.